Welcome back to the podcast, fellow grievers. This episode, I want to talk about miscarriage. So, welcome back. And somebody had messaged me the other day asking if I had a podcast episode about miscarriage. And it's like, oh my gosh, I do not. So, that is what kind of came about or developed this podcast is I really want to talk about miscarriage because as I've talked about more about grief, as I'm sharing with more, I've realized how common miscarriage is. I also think there is a lot of hurt surrounding miscarriage. I think there's a lot of misconception. I think there's a lot of cliche things that can get said that I just don't think that people talk about it enough. So I do think, in the last 5 years, I have seen more come about miscarriage. And so I think that is such an amazing, beautiful thing that more women are open to sharing about this and men and talking about this because it is such a painful topic. I also, since this is a Catholic podcast, I just want to touch a little bit on how we are pro-life. And I don't always think that the church equips us to see what that means on all around, right? Because when somebody has a miscarriage, a lot of times there is hurt that comes up because people will say, well, at least you have three healthy children. Well, you can always try again. You can always adopt, right? And like that hurts. That is very painful to hear when you have lost a baby. So, I also want to have full disclosure on this podcast and just say I have never experienced a miscarriage. I don't know firsthand what that loss is like. However, I have some cousins that have experienced miscarriage. I've also had quite a few family members that have gone through infertility. I know my mom talked about, I can't remember, I don't think she ever had a miscarriage. But I know that she talked about it early on in their marriage. She just thought, like, we can't have kids. I know they struggled with infertility for about the first 3 years. So I do know that is something that my mom talked about a little bit. But again, I can't remember if she ever had a miscarriage. I know a few of my aunts have. I know that my grandma had multiple miscarriages in between my oldest aunt and then my mom. They are 12 years apart, those two sisters, and so there was multiple miscarriages in there. And so I just, again, I as I'm learning more about this, I just realized like, oh, it's very common, it's very painful, and we don't talk about it enough. So I want to make sure I have a podcast on miscarriage. So as I start this, I really want to talk about the science behind miscarriage. And I just think this is something that again we don't understand. We don't realize. And so I just briefly kind of want to talk through like the hormones, what happens in your body, and then kind of afterwards like what we can do with that information. So during pregnancy, we have large amounts of human, I don't even know how to pronounce this, you guys. Okay, so my apologies. It's called HCG. So human chorionic gonadotropin, I think is how it's pronounced. HCG, okay, that's the level that hormone level that goes up. We also have large amounts of progesterone and estrogen. So these are the hormones that support the pregnancy and really affect every system in the body. And so then when you have a miscarriage, the HCG levels decline, the progesterone and estrogen fall rapidly, and your body receives signals that the pregnancy has ended. So the hormone shift that happens can feel like a severe postpartum experience, okay? And and I say severe because if you've gone through postpartum, it's like I've gone through postpartum 6 times and it's varied on different levels each time. And so with this, it's like it's a severe postpartum experience, okay? And so what you also, as you're experiencing the miscarriage, as you're going through it, you may be experiencing cramping, lower back pain, bleeding. Like passage of clots or tissues. And this can depend on how far along you are in the pregnancy, right? How developed the baby is. And so when miscarriage happens, it takes time for your body to recover. And so as the HCG level is leaving your body, it doesn't just disappear overnight, right? It doesn't just go back to, oh, okay, like back to normal. And of course, I want to say, like, that makes so much sense because that's not how our body works when during our cycle. That's not how it works if the pregnancy is carried to term. It's not how it works in postpartum, right? Like, we aren't able to flip a switch and just have all these hormones just like, boop, okay, that's done. Let's equal out now. Like, that's not how it works for any of it. So it makes total sense that it takes a while for our hormones to get back kind of on balance. So again, the pregnancy hormone, the HCG, does not just disappear overnight. So this is kind of a guideline of how long it takes for this hormone to kind of fade away or leave your body. So if you have an early on miscarriage, it'll take about 1 to 6 weeks for the HCG to leave, which again makes sense because depending on when you have the miscarriage, then it'll take a few weeks. Later on, miscarriage, it could take several weeks up to a few months, right? Again, which makes sense depending on how developed your baby is or was. So until the HCG levels return to zero, you can continue to feel nauseated, have breast tenderness, feel emotional. You might even have a false positive on another pregnancy test, right? Because you still feel pregnant. So you might be like, oh my gosh, am I pregnant? Like, so you might get a false positive, which can be even more painful when when this is happening, right? Because it can feel like the pregnancy symptoms are still there while you're grieving and experiencing the loss. And so it can take So again, when the hormones return to normal, so it takes a couple weeks. Well, we'll say it varies, right? So like if in the first 1 to 2 weeks, as the HCG levels, as the hormones are returning to normal, in the first 1 to 2 weeks, you're going to experience that rapid hormone decline. You're going to feel fatigue, mood swings, you're going to have crying, headaches, sleep disturbances. Okay. In the next 2 to 6 weeks, your hormones are continuing to stabilize. So then your energy might be a little better, but it might be one of those things where like, oh my gosh, I have so much energy, and the next day just be like depleted. So your energy level can come and go. The bleeding usually resolves, and then you maybe ovulate for the first time, which brings up different hormone levels, right? Or like starts to fluctuate that again. For the 6 to 8 weeks after, again, this is as after the miscarriage, then these following weeks, okay? 6 to 8 weeks after the miscarriage, you may experience your first period again, and your hormones are often about pre-pregnancy levels, okay? So you're kind of starting to get, I don't know, more equal, right? More stabilized in your body. But that can take 6 to 8 weeks after the miscarriage. So remember, you had all these hormones while your baby was in utero, and then you experience miscarriage, the loss of your baby, and then it can take an additional almost 2 months to have things to return to quote unquote normal, right? And that's just within your body. That's not talking about the emotional time. I'm just talking about the response of your body. Can take up to 2 months. And so this is why we can feel off when this happens. Again, it's not only the emotional effects of grief, it's also your brain responding to the hormone withdrawal. The progesterone and estrogen influence serotonin, dopamine, mood regulation, and sleep. So all those things are kind of off. When they decrease, when your hormones suddenly decrease like this, you can have anxiety, depression, irritability, brain fog, difficulty concentrating. which is again similar what to you experience postpartum, but it's just I want to say more extreme. So it shows that pregnancy changes the brain very early. So let's say you had a miscarriage. Let's say you found out you were pregnant around 4 weeks and you had a miscarriage at 6 weeks. As we know, again, as Catholics, as Christian women, we know there's a baby, right? We already know that. And so our neural pathways are beginning to adapt for that caregiving that it's anticipating. We have an emotional attachment that quite often forms immediately. Your body begins preparing for motherhood, as it should. So then when a miscarriage occurs, you're grieving not only for the baby, but also the future that we begin to imagine. And so I just wanted to say, again, hormonally, what is happening in your body? Because I think that we say miscarriage and it just kind of seems like it doesn't encompass everything that's happening. And often you can have like physical symptoms, right? That can kind of surprise us. You might feel again fatigue, you might have breast changes, you might have night sweats from all the hormones, hair changes, irregular cycles, which again makes sense because all of that can happen with pregnancy, after pregnancy, during pregnancy. So it makes sense that your body, even though the pregnancy has ended, your body is still going to go through those things. And so I want to talk a little bit too on after, let's say your hormones are kind of back in check, you're about 2 months out, you might feel like, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to get back on track. Maybe I'm ready to start losing some weight. Maybe I'm ready to start having a schedule going again in the house. And I think that that's a good time to start just looking at what the future might look like. I also want to acknowledge that it might take longer than the 2 months. Okay. I want you to look at that and be like, maybe, but again, that's where when we start to pause and assess and say, where am I at? Then we can make a decision. Say, no, I'm not ready for that. I'm still having a lot of sleepless nights. I'm still having a lot of night sweats. I just feel emotionally like I'm just really charged up all the time. Like I'm quick to cry, I'm quick to anger. I want you to look at that and just be like, okay, no, I'm not ready to go and focus on losing weight. I'm not ready to be like, okay, I think I'm ready to go take on this project at work. So I want us to look at that and be like, be able to communicate again to our spouse, to our loved one, maybe coworkers or a boss. Say, hey, I'm not ready yet. And that's okay. And then I would give it another 2 to 3 weeks and I would reassess. If you are in the place where you're like, yes, I'm about that 8 weeks out, I'm feeling pretty good. I feel like my energy is back. I feel more like myself again. That's where then we can say, okay, maybe I want to focus on losing weight. I also kind of want to put a little snippet in here on, of course, follow up with your doctor, follow what their guidelines are, and physically for your body, if you're still having heavy bleeding, obviously, like don't be like, okay, I'm gonna go start doing cardio workouts. Follow your doctor's recommendations on that as well. So I just want to put a little side note snippet in there. But the important thing is to know like we can feel when we have that shift and that change in our emotions, in our energy, when we're ready. Okay. And I say ready kind of in quotes because it's like, you still have gone through a loss. You've still experienced that. And there's going to be a part of you that is always going to be sad about that. Again, I just want to say, like, when you start to feel that shift in the energy, it doesn't mean that we are not acknowledging the baby, that we won't have moments of sadness, that we won't have probably, even 6 months out. Oh, they would have been a year. Oh, like they would have been 3 years. Right? Like we're always going to have that. But I'm talking about when we can start to feel that physical energy, hormone kind of regulation happening. And I do have experience with that postpartum. I do know when I get to that place where I'm like, all right, yeah, I'm still not getting great sleep because, I still have many young kids and a baby, but I feel more energized. I feel like myself again. I feel like those hormones have evened out. So that's what I want you to stay in tune with. When you feel like, okay, yes, I still have sadness, I still have the grief, but I'm ready to start taking a few steps forward. So I want to briefly talk too about my summer program that is called Grief Doesn't Stop During Summer because it doesn't. And I want you to have the best summer that you can. I want you to be present with family and friends, even while grief is happening, because they can coexist together. And we often think they can't, but they can. And so that is what I help you with. It is a they're 3 short videos on how to understand what's happening in your brain during grief, what to do about it, and then how to handle those family and friends that say those cliche things that are not really helpful. So I invite you to go and get that. I'll put it in the description below. Click on that, get access to that. You don't want to miss it. It's so much good information. You'll be like, oh my gosh, I wish I had this before. So grab that. Um, and that is available. Yeah, that's available for now till the end of summer. So again, I want you guys to have a great summer or the best summer you can, right? Because reality is there's still hard days. There's still things that come up, that there's sadness and different things tugging at our heart. So I want you to have the best possible summer that you can. And as always, I'm praying for you. You are so loved. And let's take the next steps together. God bless.